Welcome, dear audience. Today I will be presenting about entrepreneurship. So welcome to the presentation. Let's begin. So first of all, let me begin by talking a little bit about business schools and what they were first set up to do. Business schools are not as old as universities. The first business school was founded in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And the reason for its existence was basically to try to help large organizations with their large company problems. Typically, it's argued that they began with grants from the Department of Defense or the Ford Foundation. And so they were trying to solve problems like where should companies set up their factories? How should they hire new employees? How should they design their factories? How can they motivate their employees? Where should they get their money from? And so on, and solve, in general, large company problems. And over time, they became pretty good at this. And the number of business schools developed quite a bit over time. But they didn't really focus on small companies or entrepreneurship because, well, the funding was coming from large companies and their problems. So that was where most of the attention was paid. And also at that time, the importance of entrepreneurship and small businesses wasn't as known or wasn't as widely accepted as it is today. Over time, this importance grew and business schools started to care more about entrepreneurship as well. But the first attempt at helping entrepreneurs, helping small businesses, was basically an attempt to treat small companies as if they were basically small copies of large businesses. So in a large company, how you successfully operate is basically you prepare ahead of time, you do a lot of planning, you prepare detailed plans, you break up a big project into little pieces, you assign each of those pieces to a separate department. And if everybody does what they're supposed to be doing, you put it all together and you have success. So as we initially believed that small companies were basically small, simpler copies of large companies, we tried to do the same thing in these small companies as well. Unfortunately, the results were not very successful. The biggest problem is that small companies are not smaller, simpler copies of large companies. They are places where chaos reigns, where there's a lot of uncertainty, and we don't know a lot of things. Things are changing. So that long-term strategic planning and breaking up the job into little pieces and so on did not function very well. And as a result, we needed to take a second look to try to determine how we could undertake this. And over time, what's happened is that a new methodology to teach entrepreneurship and help entrepreneurs has started to emerge. And that's basically what I will be talking about in today's presentation. So first of all, you may have heard in my previous presentations that not all entrepreneurs are necessarily equal, or the value that they create is not equal. We have argued that there's a small subset of entrepreneurs which make most of the difference. We've talked about the role that they have in economies and that they create a lot of growth and jobs in economies, but not everyone has an equal role to play. It is the high growth potential entrepreneurs that make the biggest difference. So I want to use a definition of entrepreneurship that deals particularly with these types of entrepreneurs. So I use a definition kind of derived from Eric Ries's definition of what a startup is. And so according to my definition, an entrepreneur is somebody who's trying to develop a new product or service. So that's pretty standard, but is trying to do this under conditions of high uncertainty. So it is the high uncertainty that makes a big difference between, a small business which doesn't have a lot of growth potential versus one which, if it's able to resolve that high uncertainty and become successful, can potentially have a big effect on sales, on creation of jobs and value. So this is the definition, and I like it because two main reasons. One, it actually excludes some people, which a lot of people would consider entrepreneurs, according to the classical definition. And second, it includes some other people which might not be considered entrepreneurs, according to more classical definitions. So the group that it excludes are kind of the group that I guess I would call clone entrepreneurship. And these are people where the thing that they're trying to do, yes, they're trying to come up with a new product or, a new service, but they're trying to do something which has been done before the same way. Okay, so in that sense, you can refer to them as clones. So the product is known, the pricing is known, who you're trying to sell to, the customer segment is known, what problems they have, what they need, and so on is known. So in general, the business model of these entrepreneurs is known. So that doesn't necessarily mean that success will be guaranteed, but it's much more about the implementation of that plan, which is required to be successful in this type of entrepreneurship. So again, success isn't guaranteed, but usually if you're able to implement that model in a proper way, yes, it's usually much more likely compared to the other cases. However, again, in this environment, if we switch back to our definition of entrepreneurship, there's quite a bit of uncertainty. And together with that uncertainty, yes, there is a potential for high growth and high value creation, but at the same time, there's also a significant chance of failure. And if I were to ask you, if we were face to face, what percentage of new companies do you think survive? And there are some numbers out in the internet, urban legends or internet legends, which are very scary. If you do a quick search, you might run into the number of something like 80% or 90% of new companies will fail in 1 year or in 18 months. So that number is very scary. And the first time I heard it, I thought to myself, do I really want to be teaching entrepreneurship? Because the people that I am pushing towards entrepreneurship, if truly 90% of them failed in 1 year or maybe a little longer, that would be horrible, because failure creates a lot of losses for those individuals. So I probably wouldn't be teaching entrepreneurship with as much belief, as much strength, if I believe those numbers to be true. So what are the real numbers? Well, let's first start out with some numbers for the United States. This is coming from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Actually, this graph can be found at the Small Business Administration website. And here they show us that this is percent of establishment which are still alive after 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 15 years. And the different colors represent when the companies were established. So actually here we have 4 separate lines that we're actually seeing. So companies established in 95, in 2000, in 2005, in 2010. And the thing that you might observe here is that all of them seem to, coincide quite closely. So I would say that this increases the strength of this result. I can more confidently tell you that for companies in the United States that are getting established, this graphic allows us to understand what their survival probabilities are and how long, how much of them are expected to survive. So by the end of the first year, if you look at this, about 20% of them have shut down. So this doesn't mean they all went bankrupt. Some of them may have shut down because they don't want to continue. Some of them might actually have been purchased by other companies, in which case they would still show up as shutting down. But I think that those would be quite a small percentage. So the majority of the companies that have shut down probably were unsuccessful. And yes, I accept that there may be, maybe a couple of percentage points which might actually not be unsuccessful companies. But for our purposes, we can probably assume that away for now. So 1 year, about 20% shut down. So what was the other percentage? They were saying, 80 to 90% shut down in 1 year or 1.5 years. That doesn't seem to be the case. If you go out 3 years, it looks like about 1/3 of companies have shut down, but 60 to 65% or about 2/3 are still in existence 3 years down the line. If you go to 5 years, it looks about 50-50. So 5-year survival, about half companies make it out that far. And if you go out 10 years, it looks like about 2/3 have shut down, while about 1/3, around 30 to 35%, seem to still be in existence. So what does this mean? Well, to me, it tells me that, yes, survival is not certain. There's a significant portion that don't survive, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, but the percentages are much higher than those urban legends tend to suggest. So, about 35% surviving, 10 years tells me that, yes, if you do a good job, if you understand the market, the customers, if you work hard, you may be able to succeed. And also we'll try to talk about why I think there's that much failure in here. Well, you might ask, what about for Turkey? Do we have these numbers? Well, unfortunately, I don't have very good numbers, but we're working on it with some of my thesis students. And what we have been able to find from the official gazette in Turkey is that in Turkey, we are faced with, interestingly, when I asked people on social media, I had some surveys put out, and I said, what do you expect the Turkish survival rate of new companies to be? Is it higher or lower than the United States and other countries? And many people said, it's got to be worse. It's got to be, lower than the others. So then when we came up with these numbers, it was quite unusual, unexpected. So what we see here is, so for years beginning in 1990, 95, 2000, 05, 010, and 15, I basically tried to draw the same graph. And overall, what we find is that there seems to be two kind of separations. One of them is before 2000, so 90 and 95 established companies seem to have slightly higher survival rates compared to the 2000 and after companies. And here, this is 5 years out. So after 5 years, before 2000, the expected survival rate was about 90%, much higher than in the United States. And after 2000, it's gone down, but it's, still above 80, maybe about 85%, 5-year survival. If you go out to 10 years, before 2000, seems to be around, hovering around 80%, just under it maybe. And after 2000, it seems to be around, 65%. So 2/3 survival. And that's the main conclusion that we have right now. This includes all companies, corporations, and limited companies which were established in these particular years. And with data from the official Gazette, Ticaret Sicil Veri Tabanı, we were able to obtain these estimates. And we did some work on these numbers. So we're working on an article and a thesis using this data as well. So we will get back to you with more details about some geographical differences and differences in the industries. But right now we can say that, well, you know, for 5 years, post 2000, about 80% seem to be surviving at least 5 years. And about 65% seem to be surviving at least 10 years. And as a result, you know, our survival is higher than the United States figures. Is this a good thing? I'm not sure. Okay. Yes, they're surviving, but are they becoming very successful, hugely successful, right? Survival doesn't mean everything's going great. Maybe some of these companies are just barely hanging on, or we might even have some which might be called zombies, you know, companies that have not officially shut down, but that they're not in business, they're not functioning, they're not selling. So we're also trying to identify those companies. And up until now, the results have shown that that doesn't make much of a difference when those are excluded either. So again, the results are basically, the conclusions basically the same. There is a significant amount of failure, but it's not nearly as high as those internet or urban legends seem to indicate. So we need to still think about, you know, if we want to help the entrepreneurs, especially the high growth potential entrepreneurs, do a good job, help the economy grow, create jobs, and so on, how can we help them? So how can we reduce that mortality rate? How can we push up the survival success rate even more than here? So that's what we're trying to do. So there is a study that was done by CB Insights that looked at companies that have received financing and then later, you know, stopped their existence, went bankrupt, shut down. And here, they repeated this over time. They've been increasing it, but initially they looked at, you know, over 100 companies. I think now they're up to something like 300 plus companies, which they examined. And they looked at the explanations that were given in the letters or whatever, or the web blogs that these companies issued upon ceasing existence. And what they found was that in 42% of them, no market need was listed as the reason why they were unsuccessful. And notice that these will add up to more than 100% because more than one reason could have been given as the reason for their failure. But what I want to draw your attention to, you can look at the details, but from my point of view, the most important thing here is that top one, no market need. So basically entrepreneurs trying to develop something for which there is no customer. And that's very, very sad because entrepreneurs spend a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of reputation developing these products and services, only to then find out that the market doesn't want it. The market doesn't need it. There is no customer willing to pay for it. And that's a huge waste of resources. So we need an approach which will hopefully cut down on entrepreneurs which are unsuccessful because they're trying to work on a project that the market doesn't necessarily want. So how can we do this? Well, the lean methodology, which I teach in a lot of my classes, and the tools which we teach in these classes are things which help entrepreneurs truly understand whether, you know, what they're trying to do is going to be what the market wants, or one of the things that the market wants. So At the same time, you can also think about this. If you're doing entrepreneurship under those conditions of high uncertainty, okay? So let's say that you successfully undertake the project. Okay, so you have this big plan about what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, how long it's going to take, where you're going to sell it. And then let's say you do exactly what you had said in your business plan. So you do it on time, you do it on budget, you do it according to the quality that you had in mind, according to the original design. And by the way, being on time and on budget, the only way that happens in real life is if when you're initially determining how much time you need and the budget that you need, if you obtained an estimate and then multiplied it by 2 or 3, that's probably how come you were able to come in on budget and on time. Because in entrepreneurship, there will always be things that go wrong. And almost always it will take longer than you expect. It will cost more than you expect. And you will end up spending a lot more money than you expect. But let's, for now, assume that you were able to do everything according to your initial plan, business plan, which you had prepared. And you do all of this. And then you go and, whatever it is that you're selling, this is my product. So you take it to the customers and you say, dear customer, here is the product that I promised you. Please buy it. So the product is put on sale, and what the customer will say at this time will determine whether we succeed or whether we fail. And you know what? Just like in the previous slide, what often happens at this time, you've been working for, months, maybe years, developing this product or service, whatever it is. And then, you had a nice detailed plan that said, oh, these are going to be the customers. This is how I'm going to do it, and so on. But when you actually go to the real customer and try to sell your product, what often ends up happening is that the customer says, what is this? What am I supposed to do with it? Why should I spend money on this? You think I have that problem? I'm already solving that problem much cheaper in this way, or I don't even have that problem. So there's many, many reasons why the customer might say, I don't want this. I'm not going to buy it. It's not what I need. It's not what I'm going to pay for. And at that stage, you don't have something that the market wants, is willing to buy. So you have successfully implemented the initial plan you had, but the customer isn't buying. So are you successful or are you a failure? Well, you've successfully implemented the plan, but if you don't have a paying customer at the end of this, you're a failure. And we give it a special name, you have successfully achieved failure, okay? Still means it's a failure. So entrepreneurship wise, this is a failure. So I don't care how closely you follow the initial plan. If you're not able to survive, you're not able to make money at the end of the project, this is a failure. So this is what we don't want to happen. So our tools will help us try to fix this problem. What else could take place? Well, if I were to stop at this point and you didn't hear anything else, perhaps you might be tempted to say something like, well, Adil Oran told us that, detailed plans, business plans, 5,100 page detailed business plan about what you're going to do over the next 2 years, who you're going to sell to, what the price is, what the cost is going to be, and everything that you had prepared in detail. Well, that's not very useful. So if detailed plans don't work, what should we do? Well, let me kind of take a little break and ask you about this. What is this? It's a statue. Yes, it's a statue. But what is it a statue of? It's got wings. Unfortunately, it's missing the head. let me show you another version of this as well. And so this statue, if I'm not mistaken, is in the Louvre Museum in France. So this other one is from closer by. This is actually here in Anatolia, in Ephesus. And just to prove that it really is from here and that I've gone to see it. Okay, so this is a picture of me and my son, Alp. It's not a very recent photograph. How do I know? Well, Alp is now about the 15 centimeters taller than I am, so the picture would look a little different today. But this is when we had gone to visit Ephesus and had come by and had our picture taken together with this. I guess it's not a statue, but this relief. So, anybody know what this is? Well, let me give you a clue. What's this? Well, many more of you probably know what that logo is than the other pictures. So Nike or Nike, right? This is actually the Roman goddess of victory. And why is it in this presentation on entrepreneurship? Because we have something called Nike entrepreneurs, okay? And why we call them Nike entrepreneurs is that they are the ones that just do it. Like the saying, the slogan for Nike says, they just do it. No preparation, no planning ahead of time. They see something, an opportunity in the market, and they jump after it, not looking, not planning, nothing. And you might hear about some entrepreneurs in the newspapers, on television, and say, oh, that's what we did. We never prepared. We never planned. I saw something. I went after it. And look at this success. Be very careful when you listen to these stories, because for the one or two successful entrepreneurs that use this approach, there's probably 98 of them which have gone bankrupt and are sleeping maybe under a bridge somewhere. So we tend to hear the stories from the extremes of a distribution. If you think of a normal distribution, which is useful in many cases, we don't hear about the stories in the center of that distribution, the normal, the average. We tend to hear much more about the ones at either one extreme or the other extreme. The ones that did this and became hugely successful, or the ones that did this and became hugely unsuccessful, losing everything, and then, jumping off a bridge or something like that. So, if you remember this, when you read or listen to stories about successful entrepreneurs, always keep in mind that their story might not be representative of the best way to solve that problem. Oftentimes, stories of failure hold many more good lessons than stories of success. So keep that in mind. So my suggestion is, don't be a Nike entrepreneur, the type that sees a market opportunity, no preparation, no planning, just runs ahead and tries to take over the market, because most of those probably fail. And they're probably why the rate of failure is as high as it was in the previous slides. So don't be a Nike entrepreneur, but at the same time, you don't want to be the type of entrepreneur that does so much planning that they never can begin, or they miss out on the opportunity. For example, we have something called wantrepreneurs. There are people that always talk about entrepreneurship. They want to do entrepreneurship, but they never get around to it because they spend so much time talking, thinking, planning that they can't get started. So we need something in between. And the alternative that we argue for is basically, how can we use the scientific method in entrepreneurship? And the answer to that is, well, that's the lean startup methodology, which we are going to be talking about in our classes. So failure in entrepreneurship, let's say a few more things about this. And why do we have Thomas Alva Edison, one of history's most successful entrepreneurs and inventors? Why is he on a slide about failure in entrepreneurship? Well, obviously the electrical engineers that take my classes typically, when I put this slide up, they say, "Oh, Edison, we don't like him. Tesla is the good guy." Leave that aside. The reason Edison is in my slide is that the way he approached failure and how he used failure to, over time, learn and be successful is the lesson that we want to draw out of this. So yes, failure is quite common. Biggest reason probably are the Nike entrepreneurs I just mentioned. In addition to this, there's also the ones that, prepare such a detailed plan and then follow it, but, they skip talking to the customers. So they end up doing something which the market doesn't want. So the ones that successfully achieve failure is another group. And then there are some which do everything right, but they're simply unlucky. The market conditions, or there's a war, or there's COVID or something like that. And, they were doing everything right, but still they go bankrupt. Yes, luck probably also plays an important role in this. But all of these together mean that there is quite a bit of failure. And at least for these reasons, probably quite a few more, there is failure in entrepreneurship. Now, lean entrepreneurs know that there's going to be failure, and they try to use that failure in a way that allows them to succeed in the end. So lean entrepreneurs, they need a tool, okay? So the lean startup methodology is a tool that is going to help them reduce the probability of failure. And you know how it does this? Ready? It does this by speeding up failure. So speeding up failure, how does that reduce failure? Well, here's the secret. Rather than failing having used up all of your resources, this failure is failing in small amounts quickly, while generating information which allows you to improve on your model, on your business idea. So rather than failing after using up all of your time, all of your money, all of your resources, you need to fail fast, leaving time, leaving money, leaving resources to try again. And meanwhile, generating information which can be used to make improvements to your business idea. So using only a little bit of your time, a little bit of your money, a little of your resources, and again, allowing for testing your idea again and again and again. And as a result, in each of those trials, allowing you to generate validated learning, valuable information about your business idea, so that it can be used to improve your business idea to a better version of itself. That's what we try to do in the lean startup methodology. So another thing that you can call the lean startup methodology is the scientific method applied to entrepreneurship. Well, what was the scientific method? You might need to think about it or remember this from maybe your high school days as well. The scientific method is basically how science advances. And to do this, you need to first observe the world outside, and then you form a hypothesis explaining how the world behaves. And then the real crucial step is then you need to go out and test that hypothesis. And as a result of that test, either it will, support your original idea, in which case you need to test it again and again and again. And if it, survives all of those tests, the hypothesis becomes a theory and it continues. But oftentimes the test will say, no, that hypothesis was wrong. So then you need to go back, observe the world again, form a new hypothesis, which then you test again. And in each of these tests, what happens is we generate additional information about our environment, about the market. And this allows us to reduce the uncertainty, increase our information, our knowledge about the market, and hopefully come up with better and better hypotheses about how the world functions. So this approach applied to entrepreneurship is what we refer to as the lean startup or the lean startup methodology or lean methodology just in general. So that's what we're going to use. So when we have the high uncertainty we were talking about, well, what do we mean by high uncertainty? Well, sometimes you don't know who your customer is. You don't know what problems the customer has. You don't know how those problems can be solved. You don't know how much it's going to cost to solve that problem. You don't know what price you might be able to charge for that solution. You don't know where you should sell that product. You don't know a lot of things. Maybe, one of these things I mentioned, or all of those things I mentioned, you might not know, at least not with certainty. So that is entrepreneurship under conditions of high uncertainty. So what can we do in such an environment, or what should we do to be able to reduce the chance of failure of being an entrepreneur in such an environment? Well, the solution is we need to reduce the uncertainty. How can we reduce the uncertainty? We need to produce more information. Okay, so how do we produce information? How do we generate information? And since there's so many things we don't know, which of these are we going to work on first? So there's so much uncertainty. All of these are problematic. So which of these subjects are critical? And what do I mean by critical? Well, the critical ones, the most important uncertainties, are the things that if you are wrong about those assumptions in your business idea, they will lead to failure of your project. Those are critical. Those are important. So those should be discovered and prioritized. They should be the first things that you work on to generate information about. So now, for the lean startup methodology, we need some additional tools to help us do these things. And the first one is a tool to help us understand about our business idea. What do we know about our business idea? Okay, who's the customer? What's the product and stuff like this? What do I not know about my business idea? Okay, I'm going to produce this, but where should I sell it? Or how much is it going to cost? Maybe those are the things that you don't know. And unfortunately, sometimes there are things that you don't even know you don't know. Okay, so things you know, things you don't know, and then sometimes things I never even heard about. So there's no way I could have even generated some ideas about this. So there's a lot of uncertainty in a lot of entrepreneurship. So we need a tool to help us capture our business idea, which is floating up in the air, and capture it and put it down onto paper, making it more detailed. Why? Because that information I put down onto paper as part of this tool is going to help me better understand my business idea, to evaluate whether it has a chance of success or it's obviously a failure. If I don't do this, I may spend, months or years working on a project which the market doesn't want, which means it's going to be a failure. So this tool should help me state all of my assumptions about my business idea. And we call this a business model. And notice it's not a business plan. A business model is a short version of your business idea. which still covers all of the basics that you need in your idea, but is not, 50 pages, 100 pages. So the business model is a, brief representation of what you're going to do. And it looks like this. Excuse me. This is the business model canvas, the most widely used of the business models. There are others, and you can try using the others as well. But this version was developed by Alexander Osterwalder in his PhD thesis. And to summarize, it basically is a description of how your company creates value. How does it deliver this value that it creates to the customers? And don't forget this part, how do you capture a part of that value that you have created to allow your business to be successful? So all of these need to be included in your business model. And sometimes they'll just simply say, oh, the real important part is, how does your money make money? How does your company make money from this? So this, I will come back to this in other presentations that I will be making, and I'll put them up onto YouTube as well. But this is a brief version of what the business model does. And again, you can find many more presentations of mine where I go into much more details about the business model. And so developed by Osterwalder. You can go to businessmodelgeneration.com, and he has a lot of videos there. You can download the business model directly and use it. It is under the Creative Commons license, so you can use it without having to make any payments. And all that he asks is that if and when you use it, you mention that this is the business model canvas developed by Alex Osterwalder. So in his book and in his videos, he basically says that there are 9 basic building blocks, and by using these 9 building blocks, it looks like this. So it will allow you to capture that idea which is floating up in the air, put it down onto paper, and better be able to understand your business idea. And by forcing you to fill in all parts of this business model, that will force you to think about some things you probably would have skipped otherwise. Okay. And it develops a common terminology also to be able to relatively quickly and easily go over the business ideas that these individuals have. This part is the front of the stage, is the part of the business which your customers, competitors, other people see. Whereas this part, the key partners, activities, and resource, is behind the stage, where the customers and competitors might not see this, but still makes important contributions to the business idea. And down here, we have the revenues and the costs, which determine the long-term viability of a business idea. Is this going to survive? The 2 most important parts, in my other presentations, I will talk much more about this, but the 2 most important parts here are customer segments. Who's your customer? What type of problems do they have? Why do they need, your product? And value propositions. So what is your product? What does it do for the customers? And whether the customers and their needs fit with what you are proposing to them, this is called a product market fit. And it's probably the first thing that you need to make sure that you have. Because if you don't have product market fit, you don't have to worry about anything else. The idea is going to be a failure. If you have product market fit, then you can look at the rest of the business model as well, because you can still improve it. You still have other things you need to check. But the first thing you want to make sure is that the customers and their needs, their problems are satisfied by what you are trying to offer to them. And if they don't meet, okay, well, look for another idea or change your idea around, is what we need to remember. The Turkish version of this, my translation, can be found at adiloran.com. And you can go there and download this. And when you're going to use this, print it out in a large size, at least A3 or A2 and bigger. And don't use a pen to fill this out. Don't even use a pencil, but use Post-its. Okay. Why? Because this is a work in progress. When you start filling this out, as you learn more and more information about your business idea, you will see that some of the things you have on here, your assumptions, may turn out to be wrong. And with the new information that you generate, you may say, okay, I'm going to have to change this. You take it off there and you put the new information that you discovered on there. And then you check to see whether the new version has a chance of success. So this is this is a developing tool to use for your business ideas. And hopefully it will help you get rid of the bad ideas and try to find the good ideas which have a chance of success, and use your time, energy, money to solve those entrepreneurship problems. So the 9 building blocks, the value proposition, the customer segments, and how these kind of meet with each other. Your customer relations is about how do you get, keep, and grow your customers. Do you sell everything an identical product, a standard product, or do you customize it for them? How do you customize this? How much does it add to the value or to the cost, and so on? Customer relations. Channels is about where do your customers find out about your product? Where do they evaluate it? Where do they buy it? Where do they get after sales services, and so on? So these are all about the touch points between your company, the product, and your customers. So advertising channels are part of these, but also your sales channel, your distribution channel. For example, are you going to sell it in a store, or are you going to sell it online, or are you going to sell it in a supermarket? These all refer to the channels block. Revenue streams, how are you going to make money? Are you going to sell it? Are you going to rent it? Are you going to charge a monthly fee, or are you going to give it away for free and then use the data to sell your access to you via advertising? Or are you going to have a freemium where you give the basic product away for free, but you sell a premium version of the product to a small percentage of the individuals and make money from there? There's many different revenue models available out there, and sometimes it's not just innovations in the products that create success. Sometimes an innovation in another part of the business model may be what it takes to be successful. And again, in my later presentations, I will talk much more about these as well. After the revenue streams, we get to the part which we had said is behind the stage. So key activities, what are the things that need to be done successfully to be able to undertake this project? So is it production? Is it sales? Is it design? So for different ideas, what are the key activities is going to depend, is going to change. Key activities, actually, I guess I need to correct this. Key activities, key resources, and key partners should be what I have here. Key activities, what are the things I need to do? Key resources, what do I have to have? Is it, a customer list? Is it a piece of machinery which allows me to produce this? Or is it a very successful piece of software which is going to help me solve this problem? So different ideas need different resources. And then finally, key partners. As a startup, as a small company, you're probably not going to be able to do everything and have everything yourself. You don't have enough money for it. Key partners are the partners which help you do the important key activities and obtain the key resources which you might not have access to by yourself. For example, you need a very expensive piece of machinery to undertake the project, but you don't have $10 million to buy that machinery. If you find somebody in your city which has that machine and will allow you to use it at a good price, that could make them a key partner. Or if you have to sell your products in a supermarket, it should be easy to get onto the shelves of a supermarket, right? Wrong. It's very difficult and very expensive to get onto the shelves of a national supermarket chain. So if that supermarket comes to you and says, that product is interesting, we don't have it, and if you are able to produce it, I'd be willing to put it and sell it on my shelves, and I don't actually want any extra money from you, that would make them a key partner. So finally, the ninth block is your cost structure. Here we're talking about, yes, how much does it cost to produce and sell this product, but it also refers to what are the important factors increasing or decreasing your costs. For example, if you're going to be selling your product door to door, then a big factor in your cost structure is going to be the money that you have to pay to your sales force. Or if design is going to be very expensive, or if you have to, get the rights for something from individuals, then you need to take all of these into account in your cost structure. So this, very briefly, is the business model canvas's 9 building blocks. And it allows you, again, to capture that idea that is floating up in the air, put it down onto paper, and make sure that you add detail to it without skipping any important parts. So next, I want to ask you about this. This is Mount Everest, the tallest mountain in the world. Why do I have it on my slides? Well, because the first time that Mount Everest was climbed, or before it was climbed successfully, there were people that would ask this question to George Mallory, one of the famous people trying to climb Mount Everest. And they asked him, why did you want to climb Mount Everest? His answer was very interesting, I found, and very romantic, very, wow, This, by the way, is Mallory, George Mallory. And his answer was that because it is there. So when I first heard this from friends of mine that were at Metu in the mountaineering club, when I heard about this, I said, wow, what an answer. That's, so effective, that, really gets you. But be careful. If you're going to go mountaineering, if you're going to go climbing mountains, because the mountain is there and you want to conquer the mountain, good for you. That's not a bad reason. But don't try to apply this to your business life, to your entrepreneurship life. I don't want you to go out and try to do entrepreneurship just because you got the idea. Even if, for example, let's say it has research and development, it is a new innovative idea, but just because something is new and innovative, and can it be done? Let's say it's software, and let's say, yes, given enough time, enough money, yes, it can be done. Does this mean it should be done? Or does this mean it has to be done? No. Don't undertake an entrepreneurship project just because it is there, just because you can do it, just because it is innovative, doesn't mean you have to do it. So I want you to remember that. And by the way, George Mallory's story doesn't end very well either. So yes, he did give this answer, but George Mallory, together with this guy Irvine, was actually trying to scale Everest. And in the last part of the climb, they were lost in 1924. They were lost for 75 years. And in 1999, their bodies were finally discovered. So, even if it's a good story for your entrepreneurship endeavors, for your entrepreneurship stories, please don't do something just because you can. Make sure that there is a good reason for doing it beyond that. And that reason is there a need for this? Is there a market for this? Okay. So a question that the entrepreneur should be asking his or herself: can I do it? Can I build it? No, that's not the question you should be asking yourself. Oftentimes, with enough money, enough resources, enough time, yes, you can build it. Yes, you can do it. But that doesn't mean you should do it. The real question you should be asking yourself is, should we build this? Or even better, what should we be building? Okay? Build something customers want is the lesson that you hopefully will be taking from this presentation. So this is the question to focus on. Now, let me finish out my presentation by mentioning the lean startup and its constituents and some terminology. So yes, the lean startup book was written by Eric Ries. It evolves, it adds on to work done by Steve Blank and his customer discovery, customer development approach. It's about using resources as efficiently as possible, okay? And failing fast, failing small, failing fast, so that each time you fail, you test a part of your business idea. And with the new information that you generate from that test, you add that to your knowledge base and you make adjustments to your business idea. And then you test the new version of the business idea is what you need to do. And to be able to do this, there's something called the BML loop: build, measure, learn. So you build something which you use to test your idea about your business idea. You measure what effect that has. And from that measurement, you learn something new about your business idea. And it looks like a straight line, but it's actually a loop. You do this again and again and again, as many times as possible before running out of money. So that's the logic behind the lean startup methodology. What you're trying to generate each time you go through this loop is validated learning, information about your business idea, which is supported by the real information from the market, validated learning. And a tool which we're going to use while trying to do this is the minimum viable product, or MVP for short. We'll talk more about this in later presentations. And the decision you make each time you test a part of your business idea, you make a decision about whether you want to continue, called persevere. Do you want to continue in this path, or do you want to make some changes? Small changes are adjustments. Big changes are pivots. A pivot is when you make a relatively big change in your business idea, still using the information you collected up to that point. And sometimes even a pivot can't save a business idea. In that case, you say, okay, this project, this business idea is now dead. Hopefully it doesn't happen too frequently. Most of the time, by making adjustments, making changes, you should be able to change the idea, evolve it into something that has a chance of success. And again, what you're trying to achieve, at least in the first stage, is product market fit. What you're offering, what the market customers want, hopefully they will fit together. Some additional reading resources for you if you'd like them. You can take a look at this slide. I will be giving more material, and you can find a lot of links to videos and other stuff about these resources on my webpage, adiloran.com, as well. As usual, if you need to get in touch with me, I'm at the Department of Business Administration at Middle East Technical University. My email is adloran@metude.edu.tr. And you can also find me on Twitter as Adil Oran, or the website, my website is adiloran.com. LinkedIn, Adil Oran. So in general, any place you write Adil Oran, you can find me. So it was fun to make this presentation to you. I hope you found it useful, and I hope you enjoyed it. I will see you around.